Obsession isn't rooted in love. It's rooted in control. That's the first uncomfortable truth you must accept. Love may be warm, mutual, and open, but obsession is something colder, darker, and far more potent. When someone is obsessed with you, they aren't just interested. They're consumed. And what consumes them isn't affection, but the loss of control over how you make them feel. True obsession doesn't begin with romantic gestures or charming conversations. It begins in the silence between words, in the unanswered questions, and in the tension of not knowing. It's the mental and emotional chaos created when someone can't figure you out. They wake up with your name in their head, not because you gave them love, but because you gave them uncertainty. And the human brain is wired to chase closure. Machiavelli never used the word obsession, but he understood its anatomy. It's not about giving more. It's about withholding just enough. Obsession is power disguised as longing. It's what happens when someone feels out of control, yet wants to remain in that space because it feels exciting, mysterious, and alive. This kind of influence can't be bought or begged for. It has to be engineered with precision. By becoming emotionally unpredictable, you force the other person to seek patterns, to decode meaning in your silence, your glances, your withdrawal. You stop being just a person, you become a puzzle, a question, a need. And here's the twist. The more they try to regain control, the more power you gain. Because every time they think about you, analyze you, or question themselves because of you, they're handing you a piece of their mind. You didn't take control. They gave it to you. That's the core of obsession. It doesn't bloom from sweetness. It grows in mystery, tension, and contradiction. And once it takes root, it creates a loop, a need for you that feels like survival. Not because they love you, but because they can't stop needing to understand you. So, if you want someone to obsess over you, don't give them everything. Give them almost everything. Then disappear. Because obsession isn't built on presence. It's built on what you withhold. Desire doesn't grow in abundance. It grows in absence. The more present you are, the more predictable you become. And the moment you become predictable, you become ordinary. If you want someone to desire you to the point of obsession, the key is not to give more, but to withhold strategically. Withholding isn't cruelty. It's power. It's the act of making space for longing. And longing is where obsession begins. Machiavelli understood that people are drawn to what they cannot fully have. It's not the gift that holds power. It's the delay in giving. When you are too available, too quick to respond, too eager to please, you create comfort. And while comfort feels good, it kills intrigue. No one obsesses over what feels easy. They obsess over what leaves them questioning. Think about it. The people you couldn't stop thinking about weren't the ones who texted back instantly or showed up every time you called. They were the ones who left gaps, who made you wait, who made you wonder. That uncertainty, that tension, is what creates psychological investment. It forces the brain into a loop. What are they thinking? Why didn't they respond? Did I do something wrong? When you starve someone of certainty, you don't just occupy their mind, you infect it. Your silence becomes louder than words. Your absence becomes presence. You make them replay your last message, search for meaning in your tone, analyze your timing. They build a story in your silence, and you become the protagonist. But this isn't about manipulation. It's about control through restraint. You are not being cruel. You are being deliberate. By refusing to be too available, you train others to value every moment of your presence. You give just enough to spark desire, but never enough to satisfy it. This is how you create emotional hunger, and emotional hunger becomes addiction. Don't chase, don't overexpose, don't try to prove your worth. Instead, pull back. Withdraw strategically, because desire is not born from what people receive. It's born from what they're afraid they might never get. And that fear, that uncertainty, is what fuels obsession. If you want to become unforgettable, stop being fully understood. You must stop trying to be clear and start becoming complex. A person can be known and forgotten. But a puzzle? A puzzle lingers. A puzzle haunts. The moment someone believes they've figured you out, the chase dies. But when they're unsure, when your words contradict your glances, when your affection dances on the edge of indifference, their mind becomes a battlefield they cannot escape. Obsession doesn't grow in clarity. It grows in confusion. The human brain is wired to solve, to make sense of patterns, intentions, and emotions. But when you're a walking contradiction, you hijack that process. You become an unsolved riddle they replay over and over again. Was that glance sincere or calculated? Was that touch emotional or strategic? They ask these questions not because you told them something meaningful, but because you didn't. This is where true power begins, not in dominance, but in mystery. You let silence hang longer than comfort allows. You let your smile suggest something your words never confirm. You create space for interpretation, and in that space, they build stories, possibilities, fears, and fantasies. The more they try to decode you, the deeper they fall. You don't owe consistency, you owe complexity. Today, you're intense and sharp. Tomorrow, lighthearted and distant. One moment you praise them, the next you tease them. Each shift adds another layer they can't quite pin down, and that uncertainty is addictive. They don't know which version of you is real, and that keeps them coming back. Because as long as they're unsure, they have to keep engaging, keep watching, keep analyzing. You become the mirror they can't quite adjust, a reflection that's almost accurate, but never fully. And the more they stare into it, the more they're trying to understand themselves through you. This is the secret. You don't need to be loved to be unforgettable. You just need to be unsolved. Because the mind doesn't obsess over answers, it obsesses over almost answers. And you, when crafted correctly, become the most intoxicating question they've ever asked. Obsession doesn't happen when someone feels seen. It happens when they feel almost seen. Just enough to crave more, but never enough to feel satisfied. That's the power of strategic mirroring. It's not about copying someone's body language or parroting their words. It's about reflecting their deepest desires, fears, and values. But in fragments, in whispers, in moments that feel accidental. When done correctly, you don't become someone they like. You become someone they recognize. You give them a glimpse of what they're searching for, a flash of ambition, a hint of vulnerability, a moment of intensity, then pull it back. You show them a side of you that aligns with who they wish they were. Not fully, just slightly. Enough for them to think, this person understands me. That false sense of emotional resonance hooks them. Because in truth, they're not falling for you. They're falling for the version of themselves they believe you see. Machiavelli understood this. He called it reflection, but controlled reflection, calculated, selective, and never complete. You let them feel like they've discovered a hidden part of you, when in fact, you've simply reflected a hidden part of them. And because most people are starving for self-acceptance, that feeling becomes addictive. When someone thinks, you see the real me, they lower their guard. But when you add just enough distortion to that mirror, when you misunderstand them slightly, they feel the need to keep engaging. They want to correct the image, to be seen more clearly. But you never fully let them. You keep the mirror slightly cracked. This keeps them emotionally invested. They stay in conversation, in contact, in pursuit, not because of what you give, but because of what they're trying to get. Full validation of their identity, but you never offer it. And that's what keeps them coming back. Strategic mirroring isn't about becoming who they want. It's about showing just enough of what they desire to make them believe you get them, while always remaining just out of reach. Not a mirror, but a riddle in glass. And every time they look at you, they see not just you, but a version of themselves they can't quite hold on to. If you want someone to think about you relentlessly, to check their phone, reread your messages, and analyze every word you say, don't be consistent, be unpredictable. The human mind isn't wired to crave what's stable. It craves what's irregular. That's the foundation of intermittent reinforcement, a powerful psychological trigger rooted in behavioral science and dangerously effective in personal relationships. When you give someone warmth, then coldness, validation, then silence, closeness, then distance, you create a loop in their brain that mirrors addiction. Think of gamblers at a slot machine. They don't pull the lever because they win every time. They pull it because sometimes they win, and sometimes is all it takes to keep them hooked. This is how obsession is built, not through steady affection, but through emotional unpredictability. You give them just enough of what they want to keep hope alive, but never enough to satisfy it. A compliment here, a cold glance there, a deep conversation followed by hours of silence. They start chasing the high of your attention, but because they can't predict it, their desire intensifies. Emotionally, they begin to tie their self-worth to your approval. Did I do something wrong? Are they pulling away? What can I do to get them back? These questions become louder in your silence, and soon you don't have to say anything at all, because they're doing the work for you, trying to restore a connection you never truly broke, only paused. Machiavelli understood this well. Consistency breeds comfort, but inconsistency creates obsession. You're not offering love, you're offering hope. And hope, when manipulated with precision, is more addictive than love ever was. But the key is to be deliberate. This isn't about cruelty or chaos. It's about control. You don't disappear out of neglect. You vanish with purpose. You don't compliment by accident. You praise strategically. Your presence becomes a reward, something they feel they have to earn. And in that chase for validation, they fall deeper. Because it's not the love they're after. It's the unpredictable spark of attention, the uncertainty, the longing, the tension. And that emotional volatility becomes the drug they can't quit. Everyone walks through life carrying silent wounds. Some carry the sting of abandonment. Others carry rejection, insecurity, betrayal. These pains don't scream. They whisper. They live in the background of conversations, relationships, choices. Most people don't even know how to name their wounds, but they feel them. And the moment you become the one person who not only sees those wounds but doesn't try to fix them, that's when obsession begins. Obsession isn't born from pleasure. It's born from recognition. You're not trying to impress them. You're not offering solutions. You're doing something far more powerful. You're witnessing them. You notice what they try to hide. You acknowledge the part of them that others overlook. And in that quiet, non-judgmental attention, you become relief. People don't attach to perfection. They attach to understanding. When someone senses that you see their chaos and you don't flinch, that you hold space for their pain without trying to erase it, they begin to crave your presence. Not because you entertain them, but because being around you feels like emotional oxygen. And here's where the power deepens. You don't become a person. You become a solution. Not a fix, not a savior, but a presence that makes their pain make sense. Around you, they feel whole, understood, grounded. You've now tied their emotional regulation to your presence, and that is control in its most subtle form. But you don't overplay it. You don't give them constant comfort. You give glimpses of safety, moments of clarity. Then you withdraw, and when you do, their pain returns, not because you caused it, but because you were the only one who ever made it go quiet. That contrast, pain in your absence, peace in your presence, is what makes them chase you. You become not just someone they want. You become the feeling they're addicted to. And that feeling isn't happiness. It's healing. It's being understood without explanation, seen without shame. And once someone links their emotional relief to you, they don't just want to stay. They need to. Presence can attract, but absence expands. The most powerful figures in life and history understood this. The moment you remove yourself is the moment your influence multiplies. When you're always available, always accessible, your value levels off. You become routine, expected. But when you vanish strategically, you shift from a person to a presence. Disappearing isn't ghosting. It's not emotional neglect. It's calculated silence. It's the art of exiting at the peak, just after a deep conversation, right after a moment of connection, just when they felt closest to you. And in that space you leave behind, their mind starts to echo. The conversation replays. The tone of your voice lingers. Questions flood in. Did I say something wrong? Are they losing interest? Did I matter at all? That confusion is your canvas. While you are absent in body, you grow in imagination. You become bigger, more vivid, more intense, because now they're the one keeping the story alive. They scroll through old messages. They stare at unread texts. They relive your words not because you're speaking, but because you've gone quiet. And silence, when timed perfectly, is louder than any confession. Machiavelli didn't ask for loyalty. He created absence so sharp, it made people crave his return. That's the energy you command. The goal is not to punish, it's to provoke longing, not to be missed, but to be needed. You're not running away. You're rising above. You are shifting from something they interacted with to something they can't stop thinking about. Your withdrawal should feel subtle, confusing, almost accidental. You don't slam doors. You leave them open just enough to make them wonder if you'll ever walk through again. That uncertainty drives them wild, because it's not closure they want. It's continuation. And when you reappear, colder, sharper, quieter, they'll try to reclaim the version of you they once felt safe with. But you never return fully. You've evolved. And now, they chase a ghost you've outgrown. Because the you they miss no longer exists. Obsession isn't just emotional. It's sensory. The most powerful form of control doesn't come through direct communication. It comes through triggers, small, deliberate details that lodge themselves into someone's subconscious and refuse to let go. You don't just disappear. You leave behind fingerprints, phrases, places, sounds, gestures that silently whisper your presence long after you're gone. This is how you haunt someone without ever needing to say a word. A song you once played, a phrase only you used, a place you always met, a subtle tone in your voice when serious. Over time, these small elements become psychological anchors. They attach your memory to their environment. So even in your absence, you're there, in the background, in the silence, in the shadows of their everyday life. That's the real art, becoming invisible, but unforgettable. Your presence doesn't live in physical space anymore. It lives in association. They hear a line in a movie, and it sounds like you. They walk past a street corner and feel your energy. They read a book and remember how your eyes lingered on a certain line. These aren't memories. They're emotional landmines, placed carefully, ready to detonate in your absence. Machiavelli would call this indirect influence. You're no longer influencing by action, you're influencing by memory. And memory, when tied to emotion, becomes a loop. It plays over and over. It reactivates longing, even pain. And that's the paradox. The more pain they associate with your distance, the more pleasure they assign to your presence. You don't need to be physically near them. You've already moved in, not into their heart, but into their nervous system, into the way they respond to familiar sounds and smells, into the way they associate meaning to the ordinary. The goal is not to be remembered fondly. The goal is to be unshakable, a presence that shows up when they least expect it, not as a thought, but as a feeling. And feelings are far harder to forget, because when someone can't walk through the world without being reminded of you, you don't just live in their past, you control their present. People don't truly obsess over other people. They obsess over how they feel when they're around them, and more importantly, who they become in that presence. If you want someone to become addicted to you, don't just impress them. Transform them. Make them feel like a better version of themselves when they're with you. Stronger, smarter, more alive, more seen. not because you flatter them, but because your presence elevates their sense of identity. When someone feels more powerful standing next to you, they start to believe that their greatness is somehow tied to your approval. And that's when the shift happens. You're no longer just a person they're attracted to. You become a source of emotional validation, a mirror that reflects back a self they wish they were, but only become in your presence. But here's the key. This transformation must feel subtle, even accidental. You don't tell them who they are. You hint at it. You reflect it in how you respond to their strengths. You reward their best traits with attention. You quietly ignore their insecurities without ever judging them. And slowly, they begin to shape their behavior to maintain that image you've helped them build. Not because you asked them to, but because they're afraid of losing who they are when they're with you. You've now created something more powerful than attraction. You've created dependency, emotional, psychological, even existential. Because if the version of themselves they love most only exists around you, then the thought of losing you doesn't just mean losing a relationship. It means losing themselves. Machiavelli understood that people cling to those who give them identity, not safety, not affection, but meaning. When you assign someone a role, "You're the only one who really understands me," or "You bring out a side of me no one else sees," that role becomes sacred. And anything sacred is protected at all costs. So don't just be their desire, be their definition. Because once you become part of how someone sees themselves, you don't have to chase loyalty. They'll protect it like they're protecting their soul. If you want to be unforgettable, don't aim to be loved. Aim to become a myth. Relationships fade. Connections break. But myths endure. They're not based on clarity. They're built on contradiction, intensity, and the one thing that obsession thrives on: mystery. The more people think they understand you, the more they relax. The moment they feel they've figured you out, the chase dies. That's why your greatest power isn't in who you are, but in what they can't explain about you. A myth isn't just admired. It's discussed, debated, defended. A myth doesn't require presence to be felt. It exists in silence. It survives in stories. And the key to becoming one is this: never let them fully know you. Let them imagine you instead. When you become a question, not an answer, you stay alive in their thoughts longer than any lover ever could. Machiavelli never allowed people to pin him down. He didn't offer closure. He offered contradiction. Warm one day, cold the next, open then unreadable. This emotional whiplash created a psychological maze, and people obsess over mazes they can't solve. When you operate like this, your presence becomes symbolic. You're not just a person, you're what they can't replace. Don't tie your identity to roles like girlfriend, boyfriend, partner. Those roles can be replaced. Instead, create a role that only you can fill: a spiritual force, a mysterious guide, the only one who saw them. Then vanish just enough to become legendary in their memory. Let others describe you in extreme terms: intense, unreadable, powerful. Let them argue over your meaning. Let them wonder if you ever really cared, or if it was all part of some deeper game. Once someone starts defending you to others, you've crossed the threshold. You're no longer someone they dated. You're a story they can't stop telling. And stories? Stories live longer than truth. If you want to control how you're remembered, don't offer explanation. Offer echoes. Create confusion. Build awe. Because when you become a myth, you're no longer just in their life. You haunt their timeline. If you want to seal the bond of obsession, don't use love. Use fear. Not overt, not loud, but subtle, quiet, like a shadow at the edge of the room. Because the truth is, people don't hold on to what they enjoy the most. They hold on to what they're afraid to lose. And when that fear becomes emotional, personal, and intimate, you no longer have their attention. You have their loyalty. Most people think affection is what keeps someone around, but affection fades. Familiarity dulls desire. What truly keeps someone awake at night, checking their phone, replaying memories, is the creeping fear that they've done something to lose you, that they've somehow broken the fragile balance, and now you're slipping away. You don't need to say it. In fact, you shouldn't. Just let your energy shift. Withdraw slightly after deep intimacy. Respond a little slower. Smile a little less. When they reach out, be calm but colder. Not angry, just distant enough to spark uncertainty. That uncertainty grows into self-doubt. Did I say something wrong? Are they getting bored of me? Suddenly they're questioning themselves, not you. That's the seed of obsession, not desire, dread. Dread of losing what once made them feel seen, what once felt sacred. And here's the key. You're not punishing them. You're protecting your worth. You're showing, through behavior alone, that your presence is conditional, rare, sacred, not to be taken lightly. Machiavelli understood this principle deeply. Power isn't about aggression. It's about suggestion. You don't threaten to leave. You imply that leaving is simply the natural result of being misunderstood, or worse, taken for granted. And once that fear takes hold, they begin to chase not just your attention, but your approval. They begin to work for your closeness, because now, being close to you doesn't just feel good, it feels like safety. And losing you wouldn't just hurt, it would shatter something inside them. You want obsession? Don't ask for it. Let them fear its absence. Let that fear grow quietly. And before they realize what's happening, they'll fight to keep what they already think they've lost. If you want real influence over someone, don't feed their need for affection. Feed their need for validation. Because affection can feel nice, but validation feels necessary. While love may make someone feel wanted, validation makes them feel worthy. And when someone ties their self-worth to your approval, they don't just want your attention. They need your alignment to feel whole. The mistake most people make is assuming love creates loyalty. But love can be soft, conditional. It can fade with time. Validation, however, real, selective, strategic validation, is far more potent, especially when it's not handed out freely, but earned. When your praise is rare, when your approval is subtle but impactful, people begin to chase the feeling of being enough in your eyes. You don't need to be loud with it. In fact, you shouldn't. You validate with presence, tone, the way you look at them when they meet your standards. You validate with a quiet nod when they show strength, with a brief word when they demonstrate loyalty. And just like that, you create an emotional economy, where your recognition becomes currency. Now they begin to measure themselves not by who they are, but by how well they align with what pleases you. They replay conversations in their head. They adjust their tone. They correct their behavior, not because you ask them to, but because they want to remain in your favor. And here's where the deeper control sets in. Once someone begins to self-correct in your presence, you no longer need to demand anything. They do the work for you. They study your preferences, memorize your boundaries, anticipate your reactions, because your validation has become their emotional reward. Machiavelli understood this power. People don't follow the kindest leader. They follow the one whose approval feels like truth. So you don't give affection based on emotion. You give validation based on alignment, on loyalty, on behavior. In doing so, you don't just shape how they act. You shape how they see themselves. And that quiet rewiring of identity through earned recognition is one of the most elegant forms of control there is. If you want to control someone without ever raising your voice, without ever demanding anything, embed your ideals into their identity. True power doesn't come from forcing someone to follow your path. It comes from planting seeds, beliefs, values, truths, and letting them grow roots inside someone until they believe those ideas were their own. This is the invisible hand of influence. You don't preach, you don't correct, you drop truths like whispers in conversation. Most people are too soft to lead. Loyalty means nothing if it's not earned. Silence reveals more than words. You say these things casually, almost as if you're talking to yourself, but those words settle in their mind, echoing long after you've left the room. And then something happens. They begin to adopt your beliefs. Not out of pressure, but out of admiration. They see how calm you are under pressure, how sharp your thinking is, how unshaken you remain in chaos. They don't just want to be near you, they want to be like you, and that desire leads them to mirror your mindset. Soon, they begin to repeat your phrases, quote your ideas, defend your standards. They reshape their opinions to align with yours, not because you asked, but because you've become a symbol of strength and certainty. And in a world where most people feel lost, alignment with someone grounded feels like purpose. Machiavelli understood this. When you influence how someone thinks, you don't need to control how they act. They'll do it on their own, with conviction. Because now, your voice doesn't just live in their ears, it lives in their decisions. And that's the highest form of influence, not obedience, but internalization. You don't just shape their behavior, you shape the lens through which they view the world. So speak carefully, speak rarely. But when you do, speak truth so sharp they cut through their uncertainty. You're not forcing them to follow you. You're giving them the gift of belonging to a stronger identity, one they discovered through you. Because once your ideals become their own, they'll fight to protect them. And in doing so, they'll protect you.